Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Autism Acceptance, a person-centered approach to support. So I'm going to turn this over to our speakers for an introduction. Tonight we have with us Kate Carr, Drew Holman, and David Rollman. Hi, everybody.
My name is Kate. I am one of the navigators here at the St. Louis ARC. I help 19 to 29-year-olds with an array of resources, supports, services, getting in connection with others, agencies, and stuff like that.
Hi, my name is Drew Holman. I'm a current intern here at the St. Louis ARC, and I'm currently working to get my Bachelor's of Educational Studies with a focus on youth and adult development at UMSL. I have been through the Succeed program, and I have autism.
Hello, everybody. My name is David Roman. I am the coordinator of transition services. I am in charge of the Next Ed program, which is a really cool piece that we will talk a little bit later on. It's a really cool program that is for individuals 18 to 30 to really work on some transitional life skills, and really kind of focuses on the want to move out in that independent living.
So we're first going to start at like the bottom of the pyramid and talking about accommodations and relational supports. Drew and I are kind of going to do a little Q&A about self-advocacy, what it means to be a self-advocate, and stuff like that. Drew, what does it mean to be a self-advocate? To you, what does it mean to be a self-advocate?
For me, to be a self-advocate is to be comfortable and able to voice what supports and what assistance I need for myself. And it doesn't just have to be for work. It could be any aspect. It's speaking up for yourself.
I feel like that's hard though to do. I mean, especially not just at work, but in everyday life, because, you know, we're all different and we come and we encounter so many different people, and it's a hard thing to do. So for self-advocacy, is that something that you like feel as you've gotten older that you feel better about or more confident?
It's definitely a progressing skill. So what I mean by that is you're not going to be amazing at it right out of the gate. You're going to need to work on this. And for me, I had trouble speaking up for myself in high school on what I needed. And since going through the Succeed program and meeting a lot of awesome people and getting a lot of help, I've been able to advocate for myself more in class and at work. I could say, hey, I need more time on this assignment, or I need some more supports to do my job.
And this is a really great organization. It's called the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. You can get to it online, and they have quite a few resources. I know I often go to it. It's bookmarked on the internet because they have so many resources. They have, I'm almost positive they even have like support groups too, so you can connect with others. And it's through nationwide, which is great because it's not just someone maybe in St. Louis or the area, but you can connect with people all over and see, you know, I don't know, just builds communication, and it's a really, really good site. So this information is from the same website, saying that we are a community and there's no reason, you know, labels are not something that anyone wants. Disability or not, it's just not, it's not nice, it's not appropriate, and it's harmful. And a big thing that they talk about is not every autistic person might be diagnosed. So sometimes you get a later in life diagnosis, or maybe, you know, there's different things that present themselves. And instead of putting a label on it, we're all humans. You know, we all have our own struggles, and we all do things differently, and recognizing that we're all here, we all deserve the same support and stuff. And just because someone might be on the spectrum doesn't make them any less than anyone else. It just makes us all unique. And then there are multiple different resources that someone can get in school, accommodations and stuff like that. And knowing that, I think, Drew, what you were saying is like advocating in school and work. And I think that's really important here. Did you, Drew, were you feeling more comfortable advocating for yourself, or was it more comfortable? Like, I know when some kids are younger, like a lot of times you do want parents to say things because, we're younger. But did you ever experience anything in school or negativity?
Towards the end of my high school experience, I was going to my person-centered planning meetings and like my IEP meetings and everything. So I was taking charge there,
That's
but
great.
it was hard for me to speak up for myself compared to where I am now in college. Because at UMSL, I felt more freedom, I guess, because I could choose to disclose and say, hey, this is what I need. And I felt very accepted and supported at UMSL.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about community living. So Drew, I just have a few questions for you when it regards to community living. What does that kind of mean for you? Because I feel like community living and community life can look so different for so many people.
That's very true, because I think it's different for everyone. And I think for me, a big part of it is being able to get out into my community and being able to experience lots of different cool activities. So like going to my local card shop to play games with my friends, or going to the library to pick up a book. Those are really important to me. But also community life is more than just getting out and doing things. It's also doing things with people. That's something I really like, is getting out and doing things. I'm always looking for new activities to do.
I think you've hit on many different parts that are really important, not just for individuals with autism, but really all of us, when it kind of comes to wanting to get out and how we can kind of navigate our community. So I'm a little curious, like, have you ever had any difficulties with a job, or have you always had supports, or have you been able to find those natural supports in like an employment field?
I've been pretty lucky with my experience. I hadn't had a job until college, when the Succeed team walked me through the mock interview process, got me to, well, I chose to go to the career fairs and network with people. So they were really helpful with that. And I've been very lucky with having those supports. And by just doing the mock interview, I was prepared to go into the job. I applied for office assistant at UMSL, Residential Life and Housing, went through the interview, got the job, and then started. And I worked there for many years. So I've had people in my corner, and I've been lucky to have these supports.
I think that's just so important when we really kind of think about that with getting a job, and that there is so many supports out there. Like I know at St. Louis ARC, we have a great employment team with job coaches and employment specialists and career consultants that are always there to help navigate those as well. And then we talk a little bit about, so housing is a big part of your community because it's kind of, where you want to live and things like that. So Drew, have you ever had ideas about like your ideal housing, what that would look like for you?
I'm still figuring that out. I'm about to graduate in May, so I'm still figuring that out. But I have lived on campus in an apartment for a time, so that was really cool. Back to, I know we talked about support. So being able to move out of my parents' home and live on campus was really beneficial for me to know that that is an option, because I lived in the dorms at Oak, and then I moved on to an apartment on campus. And I think that really showed me that, hey, I've got independent living skills. I can do this on my own.
Was there any skill that you feel like you still want to practice a little bit more?
Cooking, because right now I'm just making different kind of sandwiches and breakfast foods from a cookbook, but I know I can do more than that. I'm going to work on pastas next.
And then the other thing is I know that one thing that is definitely a need that we do need is we just need some better funding and access to in-home support. I know we have Connect that works in the St. Louis County with the St. Louis ARC. They are a program, and I know they are so overworked and have a very busy caseload because you're in people's lives that do in-home, checking in homes and seeing how they're doing and kind of making those different lists. And I think that's a great resource that can. But I think there needs to be more of that, and there needs to be just some more community living as a whole. And then also just kind of what that would look like all kind of depends on who's available and to give the support, but who's also just available for like making sure that there is fun and leisure and doing everything when we are at home. Have you ever thought, Drew, would you ever want someone to come check in with you if you did live on your own or had a roommate?
Yeah. So if I was living on my own or living with a roommate, I probably wouldn't want that check-in.
Okay. Yeah.
That's just me. I know it's helpful for other people to have that sense of, hey, how am I doing? But for me, I've lived on my own for a while.
We've got a couple questions. Can I ask some questions? I'm going to
Yeah.
save one of them because they're asking about learning to cook. So David, I'm going to save that for later when we get to your description. But the first question was that somebody says, I want to live out in the community too. I want to have roommates. And I want to know, Drew, what you would look for in a roommate. How would you know who would be a good person? I think you said you'd like to live with a friend. How would you choose them? Or how did you choose roommates in college?
When I went into the dorms at Oak, you get assigned roommates based on 3 different criteria. For the first criteria is the survey you filled out at the beginning. Like when you first want to live on campus, you say, do you want it cluttered or lived in, clean, or messy? So, and then how do you want your temperature? So you fill out a questionnaire at the beginning. So that's one criteria, your answers on the questionnaire. The other one would be common interests. So that's another criteria I would look for, if we have common interests. And then the third criteria, I really don't think matters as much as anymore now that I'm about to graduate, would be common majors or common work.
Okay.
So what I would look for, and long story short, what I would look for is how they like their living space, and what common interests do you have? Another one would be what the noise level would be another thing I'd look for, because I don't want to be noisy if they're studying or vice versa.
Okay. So that's sort of a mutual thing. Cool. And my other question, this is my question. On the slides, I noticed that all these people, 2 of them are from St. Louis, but all 3 of them are autistic people, and they have interesting jobs. One person has his own granola business, one person's a stand-up comedian, and the other one ran for political office. And I'm thinking those are really cool, unusual jobs for anybody, but sometimes people with autism, they think can't really do certain jobs. And I wonder if you ever felt like people were trying to put you in a box as far as the work you did, or if you felt like you could freely kind of pursue your interests.
I have felt like that, put in a box before, but that was in high school.
So when you were in high school, what were they trying to lead you to do?
So it was the autism room. I was assigned to be in that room one period, like every day. And while it was supposed to help me, I ended up being the one helping everyone else. So they basically assigned me as another TA and had me help the other students in the classroom. And I didn't get the support I needed. So that was something that if I could go back, I'd say I don't want to be in this class. I would rather have a study hall or do something or take another class in general.
Fun fact, Drew, you got stuck in a place you didn't want to be, and you were a TA, and now you're going to school to learn how to teach. So maybe it had some good payoff. There is one more question about college. Is this a good time to talk about that? The question was about what kind of assistance did you get in college to be successful? Was it similar to a TA, or how did you get supports both through the For those of you out there, UMSL Succeed is a certificate program for people with disabilities, but then Drew moved out of that program into the regular bachelor's program, but continued to get some additional support. So there's kind of two different things, Drew, you can talk about.
Okay, so when I went into the Succeed program, there were different Succeed classes in addition to the college courses. Well, they're all college courses, but they were Succeed specific classes that you would have to take if you're in that program. And those classes set me up towards the path I am now on. They had there was first year experience, independent living skills, and there was the job. I can't remember the name, what they called it, but it was their work pillar. So all three of those put me on this path. The supports I received in college specifically would be advice like, asking your professor for more time. And some professors are more accepting than others on assignments. So that was one thing, is like how to write an email to your professor. How do you even go about reaching out to your professor? And now I'm an expert at it. So I'm able to, having that communication with your professors really helps in college. So just throwing that out there. I highly recommend communicating. Other supports that I received in college was Succeed has a peer program, like a peer mentor that two of them would be in Oak Hall, and having someone to show me around campus at the beginning of the semester was really helpful too.
What we believe. So I know that there is a lot that ASON believes in, like access to healthcare, getting what works for us, our lives are worth living. What is any of this kind of helpful, or what does it kind of mean to you, Drew, when you kind of look at it?
A lot of things come up. So I know for me, I believe that autism should not be cured. That even if it were possible, I wouldn't want it, because it's who I am. It's a part of who I am anyway. It makes me unique. And then mental health, I think, is a really big, important thing too, because that's something our country really struggles with, is mental health. And I think, so it's not just an autism thing, it's countrywide. I think everyone needs some kind of help, and there should be no shame in reaching out for that help. One thing that my mom has said that I really believe that stuck with me is, people don't reach out for help when they need it. Or she says it's the hardest thing about the health field that she works in, is that people don't reach out when they need it the most, or they wait too long before getting it. Access to healthcare is really big too. Sharon told me one of our participants who passed away was denied healthcare because he had autism.
Yeah, we were told that there was no transplants for people with autism at our local hospital. And Drew and I were just dumbfounded that they could make a judgment against an entire group of people like that. And I still haven't gotten confirmation before you all storm the hospitals. I'm working on it. We have a question while I'm jumped in about mental health resources, because they are so critical to everybody, but there are specific issues. There's a more co-occurrence of anxiety and depression for people with autism. What are some good access to mental health? I'm going to call Kate up for this one.
So a big thing is, I feel like anyone can struggle with mental health. And I mean, I know I personally, like, I have really bad anxiety, and and everyone can do different things, but there are many more resources out there. They can be hard to find, but there are some things. I know I personally do mindfulness every night, and yoga during the week, because I can get so overwhelmed, and just so many things. Like, I feel like I'm making like a checklist, and I'm so overwhelmed that I get out of tune to my body and what I need. And so that really helps me, like, get centered, and focus on my overall health, but sometimes it can even just be going outside, getting fresh air. I know recently what we've been doing, because the weather's been so nice, is we're taking our kids to the park because it's just like hearing the birds and just the wind. And for me personally, that's really peaceful. And that helps me just like come back to, in mindfulness, it's like come back to your core. But it can be really, really hard if you have an autism diagnosis and mental health, because it's hard to kind of be like, okay, well, finding the right provider, and then finding if maybe you do need a therapy and to talk to someone, and finding the right person. And so a big thing is finding a right outlet for you. And that's not going to be the same as me or someone down the street, but that's okay. And making sure that if you need help, there are places out there, and making sure that it's appropriate for you or your loved one, and that you feel comfortable where you're at. And no provider is going to get upset if they're not the right fit, because ultimately they're there to support you. Yeah. So it can be really hard, but that's something I feel like I do a lot of research on, because it's like ever changing, and there are multiple different services that pop up here and there. And what's nice is it's not a one size fits all. So there are different opportunities and services out there for everyone. And then another thing that I think I see a lot is just access to healthcare in general. I feel like it's so much harder finding, when you have maybe a developmental pediatrician until you're 18 or so, and then you've been with that physician for so long and they know you so well. How do you find someone that you're going to connect with and that's going to have you advocate for yourself or just listen to you? I feel like that can be so much harder, and I wish it wasn't, because in my eyes it shouldn't be. We should all be able to access proper health care. But I know that's something I personally see a lot. And do you ever have like a hard time with physicians not listening to you or questioning you? Or
I just try to make sure I understand when I'm going to the doctor, that I'm understanding everything. I'll ask questions, and if fortunately no one's gotten annoyed that I ask so many questions yet.
questions are
But
good. So
yeah, they're very helpful, especially when they're the experts and giving you the answers. So yeah.
Share what this healthcare passport is.
Yeah, so this is really great, because I actually did this for myself, because something I personally struggle with is advocating for myself and with healthcare and physicians and them not listening to me. And I think both of these documents are phenomenal, because all of the information is there. It's you can give it to multiple different physicians, but it's your voice, your opinion, it's you. And the nice thing about the My Health Passport is you can enter everything in it. You can have it electronically, so it can be on your phone or your tablet, or it can be with you at all times. You can email it or mail it to doctors. But it's nice because a big thing that I love is it's how you communicate. We all communicate differently. And sometimes I feel like physicians will be like talking directly to parents instead of the kiddo's a young adult or something. It's like a huge pet peeve of mine, particularly because we all, regardless if I'm going to communicate, if I'm non-speaking, communicate, however you communicate, you're communicating. And that's important, and we need to respect that. A huge thing on here too is your signature. And so, maybe you need help completing it, maybe you don't, you're doing it. And I just feel like all the information you need is right there, and it's accessible. So when you do go to a doctor's appointment, or maybe you need to give this to school so they know, hey, I'm struggling with XYZ, and here's this. Everyone's on the same page, but then they're also respecting your wants, your needs, and wishes. And then Life Course has a really great one too. It kind of goes into more specifics, and you can, and this is electronic too. So you can print it, save it, type it in, however you would like. But these are really great with advocating with a physician or even the dentist, anyone. I feel like going to doctors or it can be intimidating at times, and having this information ahead of time might be helpful. So communication strategies. So again, we all do communicate differently. A big thing I think is giving processing time. So when I ask someone a question, I'm not immediately wanting a response, but giving that time to process, and even myself, then I can think and just be centered. And then a concrete request. So how you're going to word something, instead of asking it in a question, maybe a statement form, and teaching back what you've maybe talked about or learned, and tell me what you heard me say. And I think these are good for really anyone, because sometimes, we need these things, and sometimes it's great because if I miss something, and it's said back to me, I know that helps me. Drew, do you find any of these that you prefer more or you would add?
I think that these are really helpful because, like, especially teach back, because that way it's kind of like you're paraphrasing in a way almost. You're making sure that, hey, tell me what you heard me say. The person will repeat what they thought you heard you say. And then you can clear up miscommunications if any have occurred. So I think that's one thing that I use when talking to other people. So
I just want to touch base on this concrete request. Oh, sorry, Kate. Especially because I feel like all of us can kind of fall into this with the I need this Friday versus when you get time. We don't want to, a lot of us might not want to step on people's toes, but we kind of take that passive way to really get what we need to use that passive communication where, like, I need this Friday off, or, when you get time, but I need this Friday off versus when you get time, I kind of need to take a day off, but like we all in Drew, I don't know, have you ever found that it's hard have you found your voice as you've gotten older where you've used more assertive communication versus that passive, or have you never been passive at all?
I have definitely become more and more assertive of myself as time went on, and setting boundaries and telling people, hey, this is what I need. That's something I've been working on a lot. I go to counseling, and that's something we work on in counseling is setting boundaries with people, and confidence. That's another thing I've been working out in my counseling sessions. So it's something I've been working on in and out, and I've only continued to get better at it.
Creating comfortable space for all. So something I know that I talked with David, Sharon, and Drew about is I don't know what I was reading. It was a blog, and someone posted something about dating, and they used different cups. It was like a meet and greet, and the different cups meant different things. And so kind of similar concept to how are you feeling, but the cups, each color meant something different. So one was like I'm in a relationship, one is I'm just looking for friends, and one is I want to date. And I was like, that's a really cool way to communicate something over, because dating is, it's weird in its own, it's uncomfortable, and I feel like kind of taking that little step out and not having to verbally say, hey, yes, I'm interested in, just knowing, hey, these cups. But then the same thing here with, green, sometimes we know that is happy, or like it's a happy color, and yellow is maybe, and red is mad. And so maybe not having to say it, but just seeing it on there, for me, I think I'm super visual, and that's helpful, because it's like, then I know kind of how I'm going to make my conversation, or maybe I won't, hey, I see you don't want to talk right now. I totally respect that. Drew, have you ever done anything where they use like badges or something that's color coded in an activity, whether that's for how you're feeling or whatever it might be?
No, I don't think I've ever done anything like that. I feel like that would be very helpful when I was younger, but I unfortunately never experienced anything like that.
Which I could even see it as being like an icebreaker in colleges, like when, like even getting to know like your roommates or I guess, people in your classes. Like to me, that's kind of a cool way to get to know someone without like being intrusive and overwhelming and meeting someone where they're at too.
I completely agree. That does sound really helpful because then you don't have to like say, "Hey, I noticed." You could just say, "Hey, I noticed your green button or whatever,"
Hmm.
and then what does that mean? People getting ask about it, and then they can talk. So it makes the first communication go easier.
Right.
It's funny. I hadn't thought about it till you guys were talking about this, but I used to use this at work for when my door was open and I had time to talk to people, when I was pretty busy. But if it was something really important, you could knock on the door, and the red was, unless somebody is bleeding or there's a lawsuit about to happen, do not open my door. And because it was really helpful, and it was hard for me to manage to set those boundaries about when I could talk to people, and it was really helpful for everybody else, I think, because I think there's other people that stand on the other side of the door and think, should I talk now? Is it good time? So just let everybody know what was going on. So Drew, I've noticed there's a Madco slide on here, and Madco worked with a Succeed student to create a sensory friendly dance performance, and he set up some of the different things they have in place. What are some of the things that everybody that you expect to see in a sensory friendly performance? Are kids able to run up and down the aisles if they're there?
For sensory friendly performances, you'd probably want to keep the noise to a minimum in case there are people in case people don't like it sudden or surprise noises,
They
that would
got rid
be
of surprise noises. They didn't put masks on because that was a concern. You're right. They let people be noisier in the space, but they created a quiet room out in the lobby so that if it was too much, you could go to a quiet room.
that's smart. Yeah, so I've Madco has come to UMSL before, and I've been able to meet some of the people who work there. So that was really cool. And then yeah, so that's something I've looked forward to over the summers when I help out with the Succeed Summer Camp. I was able to meet people from Madco, and we were able to do some cool things.
What Drew and I did a presentation earlier this week at one of our local businesses. And I don't know if you remember this, Drew, but they had just installed a quiet room in their business for people that needed to go and have a quiet space for a little while when they were having sensory overload. And that was really cool for us to see that kind of transfer to the work world.
For sure, it was really cool. And I've seen it implemented in other schools too in the past. So
And you know who also has Grant's Farm? Like it's by I guess like where you eat and where the horse stables are. There's like a sensory friendly room in there. Grant's Farm is a lot, but then having that room and I was able to go in there and it was like calm. They had these like really calming music and the lights were dimmed, these really comfy chairs, and they had water bottles, like really cold water bottles. And I was like, what a great idea. And they had it like on the outside of the door. It said it was a sensory friendly room, and they had some like stuffed animals in there of like the animals that they have at Grant's Farm. I just thought it was a great idea to do that.
So Next Ed was actually at the zoo today, and over by the kangaroos, they have a quiet zone, and they had a couple of signs and things like that was like in Red Rock, where it asked for like you to keep your voice down in case like you were overstimulated, which I thought was fantastic. I've never saw it there before, so
To me, that's what autism acceptance means, as opposed to autism awareness, which I'm really happy that's where we are, that we're creating space everywhere so that everybody has what they need. And so that's such a great example, David. Thanks.
So a big thing we do here at the ARC is charting the life course. And the nice thing about charting the life course is there are stars, trajectories. You can and Drew, you can talk about it too if you'd like. you can use it in everyday life.
Yeah, so I'm an ambassador for Charting the Life course, and I really like these tools are universal. They can be used by anyone at any time, and I found them really helpful. The support star is probably my favorite. So the support star had 5 different areas in them, and about your community based, personal strengths and assets, and unfortunately my computer is cutting off and I can't see the entire star. But 5, it really gets you thinking about what makes you you, you know? So that was something I found really helpful. Like what skills do I have? I've got a lot of good skills.
Drew, I have a question. What is something that you've used the support star for?
I have used it for what I'm going to do in the future. So what I used it for was to map out. In the center, I put my what I do after college, and what tools and skills could I use to ensure that I get a job after college. So that's what I used it for.
We had a pre-submitted question about a mom who or dad who has an 18-year-old and they're worried about getting services. Would you think about using some of these tools to think about what they might already have and then what they might need?
I highly recommend these tools for that purpose. Yes, these are very helpful tools, and they let you think more. You know, because sometimes when you're caught up in the heat of the moment, or writing things out really helps, and having a specialized tool to put it in different areas, it really gets you to think more.
Can I put you guys on the spot and play a game?
Yes.
All right, so we have a question, and the question is, how have you made friends? I find it so difficult. So finding and making friends, if we put that in the center, can you guys, I'll just take the top section. So at the top, you would put your strengths and assets. So maybe you're funny, maybe you're really kind, maybe you know a whole lot about how to fix things, or about World War II, or about whatever. Maybe you're really invested in the environment or animals or advocacy, but you put all your personal stuff there. And what are some other things that could help you find friends? What about relationships? Anybody ever use a relationship to help them build more friends? Give me an example.
Through my husband, like I make friends through him. You know, we're a little years apart, but some of his friends are from work, and because of some of my skills and strengths and assets, we connect. So I love dogs, and one of his coworkers rescues dogs, and we just that's something that we connected on. So through family members or other friends, you can meet someone and ultimately build a friendship.
Excellent example. What about technology? How on earth could technology help you make a friend?
So can I tackle this one? Okay, I'm just gonna go for it. So technology, you can use it could be research. You know, you could say you could use it to find. For example, I looked up the local library has an online website with different events going on. I look at that constantly, and I go to these events at my local library. So that's kind of community-based kind of technology. You can use technology to find all kinds of cool events where you can meet people. And I've met a couple friends that way. Another thing is you can use Zoom or Skype to keep in touch with people. So that's another thing technology can do, is keep us in touch. So those are 2 things that I know about technology that can help us.
Awesome. David, anything you want to add? Because I know you were ready to jump on this one.
No, that was great. I know I was just going to share that I actually met my wife through a dating app and things like that. So I use technology, which she turned out to be a pretty good friend. So
Nice. Glad to hear that. All right. What about community stuff? Drew mentioned the library, which is a great place. Where other places can you go in the community where you might make new friends?
I would say find if you like a hobby and things like that. So I'm a pretty avid bowler. So a lot of my friends that I've met have actually come from the bowling alley. And that's something that it was something that we just joined. But then, I go on trips with them to other bowling tournaments and things like that. And so that is a pretty good community right there. But it could be any hobby. Like if you really like tennis, you could probably join and find a place to play some tennis and meet some other people. And you already know that you have a common interest and you can already bond over playing tennis. And then you might find out from tennis that you have even more interest. So I would say look at your hobbies because I think hobbies are a great place to start when thinking about how you can use that community.
You guys are such good game players. I'll just add for eligibility based, that's going to be different on everybody because that's going to be stuff that you have access to. So if you are a person with autism, then you might have access to some services through the Recreation Council, through Pathways to Independence, signing up for the St. Louis Arc. Both David and I are signed up for sports at the Arc. So that's a cool thing to do. If you're eligible because you're an UMSL student or an UMSL alumni, you could hang out at the Recreation Center or go to alumni events. If you're a veteran, there's veteran specific events. You might even have eligibility because you work somewhere that will help you make some connections. So all those things are things that you can use. So thanks, guys. That was great.
Okay, and now we're on to kind of the next portion. So we kind of talked about sensory stuff, but we're gonna go into a little bit more detail. There, like we were talking before about the zoo, you were saying, David, how they have like the quiet area. There, I feel like lately more and more places are coming up with not only sensory friendly, but sensory like aware environment. So the Magic House, they have certain days where it is more sensory friendly because the Magic House already it's a lot, but then having those days where maybe you do have a kiddo that needs the dimmed lighting, maybe is wearing headphones, but also needs it to not be as loud. And then something, I believe it's Marcus Theaters, they also have, or some theater company, they have like once a month or so many times a month. I think it's on a Friday or Saturday in the morning, sensory friendly movies. So I've not been to one. I'm very curious to see what it is and what it's like. But I feel like more and more places are opening up and becoming aware, which is I think is great. Yeah, Drew, have you ever been to a place that like has been too loud and maybe it's been overwhelming?
I've definitely struggled with loud noise when I was younger. It's something I've had to work on and like overcome. And loud noises still bother me if they're like unexpected. What I do in those situations, like if it's like, for example, Cardinals baseball game, I would just say, hey, I tell my parents, hey, I need to get up for a little bit. And I'd walk around and then come back. So I'd just walk around by the bathrooms basically. And then I'd come back. So that's one thing I would do. So it has affected me in the past, but
Well, and it was really cool when you were saying about school, how you had like the three different categories. And you were saying, like say the roommate wants to be really loud and then you need to know, like, I think like where I went to school, we didn't do that, but I think that's so beneficial because we are all so different. And some people need certain kinds of spaces to learn in. And if you're not respecting one another, well, it's not going to, it's so I thought that was just wonderful that that was a thing.
yeah. And when I got assigned my roommates at Oak, at the dorms at Oak, one of my buddies, well, we're buddies now, but we didn't really get along in the dorms. He would play video games late at night and would be kind of loud. And now that we're out, we're like best friends. We hang out all the time. So while you may not get along all the time with everyone, you just got to give people a chance, you know. You might not live, let me rephrase that. While you may not be good roommates, you could still be good friends, you know?
That is so
So,
true. And then sometimes there's something called like a sensory diet, and it's not for everyone. And would suggest reaching like having your physician, or but sometimes it can help. Drew, did you ever have you noticed certain foods that maybe helped or didn't help, or
I think like when it comes to food, everyone has their likes and dislikes, but I'm going to try everything. I'm not going to like everything. When I was younger, I had a very strict regimen. So I took a lot of things out of my diet, but I think a lot of people do that when they're younger. They go through a phase. I know one thing that I really don't like, and it's because of the texture, and it's like I can't do spicy foods, but like there's something else because of the texture that I don't like. But I feel like, yeah, everyone has their own likes and dislikes, and for me, it's just trying to discover more things that I do like.
well, and I feel like something for sensory, so many people, it's like sensory is what we touch, what we smell, what we see, what we hear. And sometimes that can be like input, like physical input. It doesn't just have to be how food makes me feel or the smell of this, but maybe, hey, I need to get some energy out and I need to do some jumping jacks or like some sort of exercise. Or have you ever had like occupational therapy or physical therapy to kind of like in school or out of school to help with various different things?
For sure. When I was younger, I couldn't do eye contact. That was something that I had trouble with. I get taken out to work on my handwriting and my eye contact, and now I'm like a pro at it, and people say I'm
Mhm.
too good at it sometimes, or they're just amazed that I couldn't tell you ever had problems with eye contact. So that was something that while I didn't really think much about at the time, like I'm just working on my eyesight or eye contact and handwriting, it did help me. I'm glad that I had someone to help me with that. All right. So mindfulness, that's something that I really like, is meditation and deep breathing. When I'm gonna do something that I know, like when there's an activity coming up that I know stresses me out or will bring me anxiety, I'll do deep breathing, specifically square breathing beforehand. That's something that I've really found helpful. Meditation and journaling. I do a lot of journaling to reflect on my day and my emotions. One app I use is Dailyo, which is a mood tracker app, and I write down how I was feeling, what I got accomplished, and then on notes, I do on the notes app on my phone. I also take notes on like journaling and then transfer them into an actual notebook. So that's something I do to reflect on my day. Dailyo and just journaling, and then the deep breathing when I drive to the Arc or drive to UMSL. I do square breathing before I get in the car and during when I drive. So that's helped me calm my nerves and focus more on my driving, and it's helped a lot. So it reduces the stress.
So one thing that I want to say with mindfulness is we actually use this quite a bit also in Next Ed. We always have something called our mindful moment. So before we get ready for either at the beginning of class, depending on if I forget or not, it's at the beginning of class or when we come back from break. So most of the time it's at one of those, so we can kind of get back into the moment to learn a little bit more of what we're doing. And I have found that there's some that, and again, with some of these exercises on the side, like the five senses, move around, connect with animals, is I found with participants that, it's not a one size fits all. So this is the one thing with mindfulness, like Drew kind of talked about, was really focusing on what works for yourself and finding out. So I know that I use the five senses a lot when I'm feeling overwhelmed, that I really like to ground myself. And so I like to point out five things I can see, four things that I can touch, 3 things I can see, 2 things, and so forth.
I think we've got such a good question, and you guys might need to think about this a little bit to answer it. But we've got a question for the mood tracker app. How do you determine your mood? I often don't know how to label that. And I think that's such a good question because I think as a society, we don't talk very much about emotions other than really basic emotions of happy, sad, angry, that kind of thing. So I'm curious if any of you have thoughts about that.
When I am tracking my mood, I not only put like a scale on a scale, I also use the feelings wheel, if anyone's ever heard of that. I use that to be more specific. And then I go from there and write that into my journal. So what I'll do is I'll say, here's the emotion I was feeling, go more specific into the feelings wheel, and then I write down in the journal why I felt that way or what happened. And that's been helpful for me. I take that with me to counseling. I reflect on what I've written. So the feelings wheel and Dailyo have really helped.
For those that don't know, can you explain kind of what that feelings wheel looks like?
Yes. So it's a circular wheel with different emotions. So it's got different layers to it too. So you've got your happy, sad, angry, but then further out into the circle, you've got different, more in specific emotions. Like, for example, for shocked, you've got awestruck or disgusted, and you've got different, it goes more in depth on the emotions. There you go. That's it. So
Yes.
there's fearful, surprised, angry is the middle. The basic emotions are in the middle. Go a further step, and then you've got more in depth, I guess. And then really specific is the outer wheel. When you really determine what you're feeling, I feel is when you're in the outer one. Okay, so this is another thing that I find helpful is the different supports for self-regulation. So everyone is different. And I know that one thing that not everyone on the spectrum falls into this, but I know one sign of autism is repetitive list making. And I do a lot of repetitive lists. I've learned to take these repetitive lists and kind of make them into checklists. So I've learned to kind of steer my list making into something productive too. So what I'll do is I make a checklist, and then I write that checklist down then I transfer it to a Post-it note, which I keep. So I've got the big checklist on my loose leaf paper, and then I've got another one on a Post-it. When I get home and change out of my work clothes, I take the Post-it note out of my pocket, and then I check off what I've done. So it's an extra step, like, oh, did I do all this? So that's something that I found really helpful. Timers are very helpful if you know you've got a set amount of time. Like, hey, here's I'm going to spend a half hour working on this, and then I'll give myself like a 10 minute break, and then go back for another half hour. I'm just using those example times. It might not work for everyone. Calendars and planners are really helpful too. I've got a big calendar, which I write all of my, like, here's when I go into the office, here's when I go to UMSL, here are my Zoom calls. So that's something I found helpful. And then I've got a planner, which is the smaller one. And that one, like the big calendar, is where I'd be more in depth on what times are and everything. Planner will just be time, and that's it. Apps, again, there's an app for everything. That's something. So like the Dailyo Mood Tracker, there's timers, there's notes, there's reminders. So there's an app for everything. Visual guides for if you're more visual learners. There are tons of how-to videos online that can show you how to do things. So there are tons of supports out there that you can use.
So one tool that we have actually started using in NextEd is a little bit of virtual reality. So in NextEd, we have some videos that are either scenarios that you might come. I know there's a video of us at like a grocery store or cooking, and we've done it in 360 view. So we actually have some VR goggles that everyone's able to do if they're in NextEd, and they're able to look around and see their environment. So it kind of puts you into that space like you're the one doing it. Drew, have you ever used virtual reality for anything? And if you have you ever found it helpful?
I've used it. The first time I used VR was for NextEd, basically, when I was helping out with NextEd. So that's the first time I've used VR. It looks really cool because you can, not only are you able to see, watch the person cook or whatever activity they're doing. I know that you also have the Airbnb where you go practice those skills, and it's the same location where you filmed some of these videos at. So not only does it help them to see it through the screen, they can also go to the Airbnb and then know what to do. So that's something I found really cool, that you filmed that in the same location.
I know through research, it was kind of that it could be helpful to put yourself into that space to kind of act it out first before you actually go in. Because let's be honest, crowds can be scary, and that is totally fine. And things like that, or grocery stores, not really knowing where to go if you've never gone grocery shopping for yourself. So you watch someone else do it and but kind of be there and give you a little bit of comfort is what the idea behind it is. And we're also, it might help with areas of employment, independent living, communication, and you have control, and you can practice in like a safe space where you don't not always have control if we are in the area or in the public if things happen. Kind of a fun way to go about it and kind of learn.
So social stories are something that I used to make them all the time. And you can make them in different ways. So how I would always make them would be dependent on the kiddo, because like we've all said, we all learn differently, and sometimes people prefer actual pictures, like when David and Drew, you guys were talking about NextEd and like being able to see it in VR. And sometimes people like a cartoon version. But basically, what it is it's a situation, or it's taking you through steps of something. So one could be a doctor's visit, or how do I order dinner when I'm going to a restaurant. I've done them on what day program might look like. What does it look like if I'm attending a day program? What are some things, or an interview process, which interview process, they can be be different, but what are some of the common things that you do? And something I think is huge is texting with a friend. How do you have a conversation with someone over your phone? And what's great about social stories is the visual and words. So you can see it and read it. So depending on how you learn, you have different ways to learn that skill. And then we all communicate differently. And sometimes people want eye contact. Some people communicate signing, are non-speaking and use an AAC device, might prefer text messaging versus talking over the phone. There's no, one size fits all. And that's why I think it's great is we have different forms of communication so we can meet everyone's needs. When I talk on the phone, if it's someone like I don't know, or like family that I haven't seen in a while, it gives me some anxiety. So I might have to like do a pep talk or like text them first and then call, because that's what my comfort level is for like family that I haven't seen in a while. But it's great that we have different forms of communication so that everyone can communicate in whatever way is best for you.
So NextEd is one of our transition programs that we have along with Launch. So NextEd is an independent living class. We focus on 9 different things. We focus on, I'm on session 3 right now. It was actually our first week, so that's on top of my head. So right now we are actually learning about our three main pillars: are communication, managing living spaces, and money management. And then our session one, which will be back up and running in October, is focusing on self-determination, personal safety, and tools for independence. And then session two is cooking nutrition, which is fun because it's a lot of cooking, and leisure and wellness and connecting to community. That might be my favorite session because it's like all fun. It's leisure, wellness, cooking, and then connecting to community. Like, it's pretty good. What we do is it is a 10-week program. And the 1st, the 5th, and the 10th week are all at that Airbnb that Drew was talking about. I am actually currently still at the Airbnb because it's a lot quieter than my house. And it is a great place because we can actually practice a lot of the things that we are talking about. And we also get to do some pretty cool things. So we always try when we are in person to go out into the community once. So today, the Airbnb is located right across from the zoo. So we were able to walk to the zoo today, go to the zoo. We've gone to the science center. We've gone to the loop where we've rode the bus and gone down to the loop before. So there's a lot of different ways that we try to engage in the community and practice some of those. So it's a lot of hands-on, it's a lot of classroom work. And again, the virtual learning is then you kind of get to learn a little bit virtual, come in person. And then our Next Ed Challenge is our summer program. So we have an overnight, which is going to be at UMSL this year. And it's kind of like a crash course of those 9 pillars that we kind of focus all at once, that we kind of do it. So I like to call it like a little appetizer, but since it's overnight, you are really getting to practice that living alone. And then we have our Next Ed Challenge day program, which we have 2 weeks of that are back to back. And again, it's that kind of appetizer. You get to come to the Airbnb, you're here from 9 to 5. You get to work on a little bit more of all those skills in the classroom, and we do a fun trip at the end.
We do have several other programs that could be helpful depending on where you are. Learning Independence for Tomorrow is a day program environment for people that have had behavioral challenges that have caused them to struggle to get jobs or be in other day program environments. It's designed to be a place where we can help you build the skills you need and then move on to some place that's more community oriented. We have a self-advocate group that meets every Thursday that's amazing, that addresses a lot of advocacy education, but also outreach. They've had town halls with legislators. They do just lots and lots of community speaking. So it's a good group. We have both a men's and a women's group that are focused on Brene Brown strategies to build your own self-confidence and your skills that you can check into. And those are free and open to anybody. And finally, so that parents can have the skills they need to step to the side, and instead of being a caregiver, be a coach and be there for their family member. We have a full day Joys and Parent Powerhouse workshop to build those skills.
Another awesome program that is new, but it is fantastic, is Life Tech. So Life Tech works where they can actually find you technology, and they work with that for goals. So it can be existing technology. So maybe some of those apps that Drew was talking, that might help you get some of those if they're useful for you, but they could also help you get some Alexas if you need reminders or any type of technology. I know some people have gotten iPads. And so what they do is they first, a Life Tech specialist identifies goals and potential technology-based solutions. So anything that might help you just with technology. And then they work with you one-on-one to get the appropriate technology that was identified by them, provided by partner funders and things like that. So that's where they might get you an iPad if they find that it's going to be helpful for your goal to say, to meet other people online, or maybe you want an iPad to read books, and it can have a text to talk special, or use Siri to help you navigate different things. And then they're going to actually help you learn how to really successfully use that technology to its fullest capabilities. And they'll work with you one-on-one. And then after your initial training, you have a help desk support, which is available for any questions or troubleshooting or anything that might happen with that technology piece that they give you. So it's a pretty awesome program.
We're not really going to go into this tonight. This is sort of that very top tier of support for people with autism or other kinds of support needs, that it's really a very individualized type of support where people go through a functional behavior assessment to try and find out what is driving the behavior that's not working for them. It should focus on skill building. It's not punitive. It's to help that person build meaningful skills to help them manage anger or communicate about what's problematic for them, and always should be approached positively. So if you want more information about this, we do have some information in other videos that we can pull up and share. So contact the ARC. We're so glad you could be here today. Don't forget it's Autism Acceptance Month. So go out, make sure you're creating comfortable spaces for everybody, and join us at the ARC for more opportunities to learn more, or reach out if you want to try one of our programs. Thanks so much, everybody.